Good morning. Thought it was time to look at another psalm. Let's just go a couple of psalms forward. We're going to look at Psalm 110. It's short. The intervening psalms, Psalm 108, 109, they're great. A little bit longer. There, David talks about pretty much his own life and his confidence in the Lord. But Psalm 110 is kind of unusual. It is generally recognized as a messianic psalm. Let's take a look at Psalm 110 together. I have here a New Living Translation. The Lord said to my Lord, sit in the place of honor at my right hand until I humble your enemies, making them a footstool under your feet. Now, just right off the bat, what David is saying here is there is a coming king, and he qualifies that king as my Lord. He sets it up right from the very start. He is not talking about any particular descendant. He is talking about the descendant. This is the Lord. This is David's Lord. This is the Messiah. Verses 2 and 3 express the Messiah's reign. The Lord will extend your powerful kingdom from Jerusalem. You'll rule over your enemies. Verses 5 through 7 talk about the Messiah's power. The Lord stands at your right hand to protect you. He'll strike down many kings when his anger erupts. He'll punish the nations, but he himself will be refreshed from brooks along the way. But in the middle of that, he has this strange verse. The Lord has taken an oath and will not break his vow. You're a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Now, in the New Testament, verse 1, particularly this, and even just this phrase, is quoted 5 separate times in the New Testament. Those quotes come in Matthew 22, Mark 12, and Luke 20, all remembering the same story when Jesus was confronted by religious leaders after cleansing the temple. And they ask him, who gave you the authority to do that? Well, Jesus, instead of answering the question, went on the attack. He says, let me ask you a question. David says, my Lord. He talks about his descendant, the Messiah, as if the Messiah were God. Very interesting, very interesting. Peter picks that up in his first sermon in Acts chapter 2. There, Peter quotes this verse as well and says this shows that Jesus is Lord. And then it's quoted one more time in Hebrews chapter 1. Now, all of this just goes to show that David had a sense of the Messiah's divinity. David had a sense that the Messiah was Lord in the same way that God was Lord. This quote in verse 4, the Lord has taken an oath, will not break his vow. You're a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. It just kind of jumps out in the middle of nowhere, a little strange. Why in the world does David plug that verse in here? Well, David probably plugged that verse in there for a couple of reasons. But among them, if we go back to Genesis chapter 14, we read the story of Melchizedek. Let's just pull Genesis 14 together. Lot is taken captive. Abraham goes and he rescues Lot. He takes with him 318 trained men in his household. Must have had a lot of servants. On his way back, Melchizedek, the king of Salem and a priest of God Most High, brought Abraham bread and wine. Melchizedek blessed Abram. Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of heaven and earth. Blessed be God Most High, who's defeated your enemies for you. And Abram gave Melchizedek a tenth of all the goods he had recovered. That is really all that we have in the Old Testament regarding this enigmatic figure, Melchizedek. The name Melchizedek is a compound word. It consists of Melchi, my king, and Sedek. It's related to the word for righteousness in the Old Testament. It may be that the name Melchizedek means my king is the god Sedek. But we also have this descriptor of Melchizedek. He was a priest of God Most High. So even though he may have been named for a pagan god, the god of righteousness, the god Sedek, he was a priest of El Elyon. He was a priest of God, using the name of God that is, it's the name that God goes by among the pagans. And here, one who is not of Abraham's lineage identifies himself as a priest of God Most High. At the same time, this figure is the king of Salem. Most would identify Salem with the site that eventually becomes Jerusalem. So we come back now to Psalm 110. David looks at Melchizedek and he says, first of all, just like the Messiah will be the king from Jerusalem, Melchizedek was the king of Jerusalem. Secondly, you're a priest forever. Now that's unusual. It's hard to know exactly what David was talking about. The New Testament authors are very clear in interpreting what David was talking about. We'll get to that in a second. But before we get to that, I wanted to take the time to go to a different document. That document is called 11Q13 or 11Q Melch, known as the Melchizedek document. This is one of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's found in Cave 11, and the number 13 or Melch or Melchizedek document refers to the fact that this is about Melchizedek. This is certainly not scripture, but it's the understanding that at least some in Israel had of Melchizedek. Very, very interesting as we read through that scroll. Not a lot of it still exists. It was literally eaten by mice. But what was left talks about freeing the captives, proclaiming liberty to the captives. And that certainly we can see from Genesis 14. Lot had just been freed from the kings who had captured him. We see also reference to paying homage to Melchizedek, but Melchizedek begins to exercise other authorities that we don't see in the book of Genesis. Melchizedek will avenge the vengeance of the judgments of God. He will drag them from the hand of Belial. Belial is the name that Qumran, that the Dead Sea Scrolls gives to Satan. He'll drag them from the hand of Satan, from the hand of all the spirits of his lots. And all the gods of justice, the Tzedek gods, will come to his aid to attend to the destruction of Belial. He goes on, and then the author of this document says, your God reigns, your Elohim reigns. He will comfort those who mourn, those who turn away from Belial. Your Elohim, your God reigns. Zion is, and a mouse has eaten that. Those who uphold the covenant, who turn from walking in the way of the people. And get this line, your God is Melchizedek, who will save them from the hand of Belial. Now, 11q Melch seems to indicate, at least in the time of Jerusalem, in the time of Jesus, there were some who looked at Melchizedek as God himself. Now, if we come to the book of Hebrews in the New Testament, in chapter 5, first of all, one of the things that the author of Hebrews wants to do is to show how Christ is far greater than any high priest who has ever lived. And so he starts out chapter 5, says, every high priest is a man chosen to represent other people in their dealings with God. And he does that, and then he dies. But that's why Christ didn't honor himself by assuming he could become a high priest. Instead, he was chosen by God, who said to him, you are my son, today I become your father. He quotes Psalm 2:7. And then he says, you're a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Now, a few verses later, he said, God qualified Jesus as a perfect high priest. He became the source of eternal salvation for all those who obey him. And God designated Jesus to be a high priest in the order of Melchizedek. The author of Hebrews leaves that alone for a couple of chapters, but when we come back to chapter 7, he digs back into that. This Melchizedek was king in the city of Salem. Now there he's quoting Genesis 14, but he's also got in the back of his mind Psalm 110. He was king of the city of Salem, and also priest of God Most High. Abraham came to meet him. He gave him a tithe of all he had. The name Melchizedek means the king of justice, the king of righteousness, and king of Salem means the king of peace, the king of shalom. And then he makes this comment. There's no record of his father or mother, any of his ancestors. No beginning or end to his life. He remains a priest forever, resembling the Son of God. Now, the author of Hebrews takes this enigmatic figure and he begins to explain how the early church came to understand Melchizedek. He says, consider how great this Melchizedek was. Abraham gave him a tenth. The law of Moses requires that the priests collect a tithe from the rest of the people of Israel. But Levi was present in Abraham. The priests who collect tithes are men who die. Melchizedek is greater than they are because we're told that he lives on. In addition, we might even say that these Levites, the descendants of Levi, the ones who collect the tithe, paid a tithe to Melchizedek when their ancestor Abraham paid a tithe to him. So the author of Hebrews comes on down and says this change has been made very clear since a different priest who's like Melchizedek has appeared. Jesus became a priest, not by meeting the physical requirement of belonging to the tribe of Levi, but by the power of a life that cannot be destroyed. The psalmist pointed this out when he said, you're a priest forever in the order of Melchizedek. Then a couple of verses later, he comments on the early part of Psalm 110. Do you remember that part where, we'll have to go back to it. Psalm 110 begins by saying, the Lord has taken an oath and will not break his vow. You're a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. The new system was established with a solemn oath. Aaron's descendants became priests without an oath. God did not make an oath when he made Aaron and his descendants priests. There was an oath regarding Jesus. The Lord has taken an oath and will not break his vow. You're a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. Jesus lives forever, so his priesthood lasts forever. And so he is able once and for all to save those who come to God through him, because he lives forever to intercede with God on their behalf. Now, Psalm 110 is a very interesting psalm. We read it, and certainly it has meaning for the people of David's day, but it has additional meaning. The New Testament authors picked up on that, and they explained that. They went into great detail to explain why this Messiah is not only king, but also a priest, not a priest like Levi, but a priest forever, serving God Most High after the order of Melchizedek. Hope you enjoyed our short little study today. Just some comments. We'll come back in a week or so, and we'll look at another psalm.